Hello everyone, this week M.A.R.S released. I wanted to wait until a day passed to upload this as I wanted to have footage of M.A.R.S as well as a good idea of how it worked before making a guide of it. M.A.R.S, for those who don't know, is a new action system which allows us to essentially summon a mech-like device to fight with for a set amount of time. It takes a total of 9 minutes for M.A.R.S to fully charge, and upon activation lasts for 2 minutes. It can be activated and deactivated at any time, however, as long as there's 25% or more battery. The biggest bonus of M.A.R.S is that it scales with player stats. This means that unlike Dark Blast from base PSO2, it won't become completely useless, and anyone using it is effectively throwing by dealing far less DPS than they would just by using their weapons. It sounds hard to believe, but yes, people use Dark Blast when the player stats were drastically higher. Never underestimate PSO2 players. Going forward, it's likely this will be a staple to NGS combat. The only downside is that it may not see much use in ARC's records, as those don't last all too long to build up M.A.R.S battery. M.A.R.S also has a potency bonus which is based on battle power that applies as follows. 0 to 1999 gives 130% potency, 2000 to 2999 gives 220% potency, 3000 to 3999 gives 400% potency, and 4000 and higher gives 500% potency. Furthermore, M.A.R.S damage is based on your weapon attack power, which means the higher the rarity, the better, and your potency floor will always be maxed out. This means that you don't need to make gear specifically for using M.A.R.S. Also, damage calculations seem to match all of the mobile cannon variants, so Braver and Fighter add-on skills will also apply to M.A.R.S. Quick Food, including Weak Point from Crisp, Alliance Mag, and Region Mag potency bonuses will also apply. This information is from a tweet from Uber, so thank you for doing the research so we don't have to. Originally, however, while I was going to talk about all the M.A.R.S main and sub-weapons, I'd instead rather just briefly go over 2 of them and focus on what is very likely the strongest overall combination for M.A.R.S. I mean, imagine me just sitting here reading the skill trees, which is something you can also do by just logging into the game. Seriously, just read your tooltips, guys. So first of all, let's just talk about Scylla and Hydra. Scylla basically is a M.A.R.S main weapon that requires you to have a lot of M.A.R.S battery built up to fully make the most of it, and combines ranged mobility with invincibility. In order to obtain this, you must be in range of enemies and build up stars. This is indicated by giant circles around you with 3 stars circling around you. Getting hit can cause you to lose stars, as well as leaving the range or using a sidestep. However, upon building up 3 stars, you are given invincibility upon using the weapon action. If this wasn't obvious, since building up this mechanic requires time, you will need a lot of M.A.R.S battery as mentioned. The stars can also be built up by hitting enemies too. In order to activate Scylla's invincibility, you must hit the enemy for weapon action. Wait a minute, why did I repeat myself twice? Whatever. During this state, Scylla will no longer naturally recover PP, however its potency will increase. Finally, we will have Scylla's big attack, which creates a giant circle around an area, which produces attacks during the animation itself. This circle will expand over time. That is a fantastic take, I should just keep this in. We then move on to Hydra, which is essentially the second ranged M.A.R.S. The main gimmick Hydra has is building up its gauge, indicated on the right of your palette, which, when fully charged, will allow you to use up to 5 charged normal attacks, which deal more damage than normal and recover more PP than normal. Hydra can also automatically counterattack when you successfully sidestep counterattacks. You can also perform a reload of Hydra's weapon action, which will increase Hydra's rate of fire for some time. For normal attacks for Hydra will also deal more damage when you have under 5 PP remaining, which means making use of Hydra's full turret to get into low PP range will be a very good strat. There's also Hydra Annihilation, which is its ultimate attack. While this has an extremely huge windup to get going, this deals massive damage and restores M.A.R.S battery for a few seconds. This is an absolutely fantastic thing to use when the enemy is about to get into a break state, as it will deal absolutely massive damage on a break. There's like a clip out there of a bunch of players using it all on Aegis during break at once, and it's destroyed Aegis. It's hilarious. So now we went over those 2 M.A.R.S weapons, but you don't want basic rundowns of all 4 weapons, do you now? You want the good broken stuff. Well, what if I told you M.A.R.S does have something like that with 2 weapons we haven't talked about yet? What if I told you could almost maintain M.A.R.S for much longer than 2 minutes with this? Well, enter Garm and Nidhogg. So what makes this duo so special? Well, Garm has a held normal attack. When you hold this normal attack, it reduces your HP, however, the next normal attack you use will be the final version of whatever normal attack you use next. This is the equivalent of the skip arts that some actual classes have. This of course includes other weapons, which means Nidhogg, where its normal 5 restores M.A.R.S battery, can be abused to extend M.A.R.S by over a minute and possibly longer if you get used to the loop. Between when the chance arrives, you can also use the Garm weapon action when charged to deal massive damage too. there's an icon for if the weapon action is charged in the right side of your palette. The best part of this is that Garm's held normal attack does not need to be completed. It has two parts, by the way. You can use the first half of held Garm normal attack into the 5th step Nidhogger normal right away. To add to this, Nidhogg's normal attacks all have parry frames built into the attacking animations, making normal 5 extremely safe to use. Unfortunately, Nidhogg brand will take an extremely long time to activate as the buildup is slow by just doing this. In order to optimize both brand buildup and Mars battery sustain, mixing in Nidhogger's Whirlwind PA is a solid idea. There is synergy with Nidhogg and Hydra, since doing the held PA of Scythe will consume all of your PP, which will allow you to get value out of Hydra's forceful attack skill. Overall, this is an extremely powerful combination to use, which I strongly recommend using to get started. Well, hello. So this is post-edit me. So after a lot of testing, and as you probably saw in the footage that I provided, Garm and Nidhogger, while it is probably the strongest combination you could use, I think long term I'd probably wind up using Hydra and Nidhogger just because Garm tends to be extremely risky. I literally died like 5 times during the recording of the footage for Interception and Battle at Halfway Lake. That isn't to say that Garm and Nidhogger is bad, because I think it's 100% the strongest, but I think that if you want to play for like safety reasons and just like overall consistency, you will definitely want Nidhogger paired with Hydra instead. That being said though, I think that a lot of the Alio urgent quests that we've been given right now are absolutely terrible because they are incredibly slow and have horrible hitboxes. I'm looking at you, phase 2 of Interception, with your terrible foot stomp attacks. So maybe there are better test subjects to use it on, but I most definitely don't think that Interception is all that amazing, let alone Halfway Lake, because of how slow these bosses are. So, you know, you could probably call this the ramblings of a crazy person, or my thoughts post a bit of practice on actual bosses, but I will probably switch over to Hydra and Nidhogg shortly after this video goes live. That's all. So we went over our 4 lovely main weapons, but what about our sub-weapons? Personally, I just recommend Fafnir or Fenrir, as these overall provide the best value. Lindworm takes too long to make the most of it if you ask me. So what about all the skill tree stuff? Can you take all of it? Well, yeah, actually. By getting M.A.R.S updaters, which drop from Battle at Halfway Lake, Interception, Combat Zones, and very likely a seal and any other future content, you can grab enough skill points over time to maximize your M.A.R.S skill tree. You can also buy them from the Masetta treasure shop, but I'd advise against this unless you feel the 250k is worth it. Spoiler alert, it really isn't. So let's talk about combat application a bit. M.A.R.S takes, as mentioned earlier, 9 minutes to fully charge for 2 minutes. This means that a fight would have to go on for 9 minutes or longer to maximize M.A.R.S usage time, which actually isn't worth it. You can actually use M.A.R.S as long as it's over 25% battery, so that's something to keep in mind. Some shorter quests like Arcs Records may not see much use, however. You might be able to pull it out during something like a break, or in the case of something like Hydra Execution, you can pre-charge it as the boss is about to be broken, as I mentioned earlier. There's a few things you can do with this, and you don't need to wait for a full battery to make use of M.A.R.S in some capacity, which is actually really good. Other than that, I pretty much covered everything I wanted to by going over Garm and Nidhogger. This isn't to say Scylla and Hydra are not as good, as they're actually pretty decent. Hydra has a lot of good use, although I'd say Scylla can be a bit awkward to use if you ask me. It's very likely that Garm and Nidhogger, due to how well it's synergized, will likely be the go-to combo for the time being. It does require you playing at 1 HP a lot of the time, but considering how you have parry frames on normal 5 and Garm has a counter weapon action, I'd say you're going to be fine once you get used to it. So, before I end this guide, let's talk about how I feel about M.A.R.S. It's cool, but my one concern is how it will change speedruns or future content. Will there be M.A.R.S specific content where we won't be able to use our actual weapons? Something to also note is that using M.A.R.S cancels a lot of classes mechanics like Slayer's Overdrive or removes Shift and D-band. I just hope that if M.A.R.S will remain relevant from here on out, it won't completely usurp our actual weapons and classes. If there can be a nice balance where M.A.R.S has its uses, I think from here on out it will be fine. I just hope that combat won't shift into being too reliant on M.A.R.S. That would be something I would strongly dislike. Anyways, that's basically all there is to talk about with M.A.R.S. I recommend actually reading the tooltips yourself in the class counter and checking out the limited time quest training for M.A.R.S so you can adapt and get used to it. It's not as easy as picking up some of the classes if you ask me. Even just learning the combos and how to dodge and counter with M.A.R.S or make use of its mechanics in here is a good idea, since it's going to be something we'll be using from here on out. Kind of funny how I said in the last video that it's probably not a good idea to check out the limited quest and instead try some actual applications in actual content, right? Well, anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.